Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. And welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. Y'all, we are headed back to one of my favorite facilities and actually to talk to one of my favorite teams to end our time in New England. So the podcast's been spending a good 4 or 5 weeks now in New England at a couple different facilities. And we're going to end it all with a conversation with Sean Hoelle and Morgan Lopes from NEI. Now, NEI, if you don't know this, is Natural Encounters, Inc., and they are just some amazing trainers. They're based out of Florida, but they put on bird shows at different zoos and facilities around the country, and they also offer different training solutions and training programs, and you can go down there and do training. This is the organization run by Steve Martin, not the actor, but the very famous trainer who has been on the podcast. And if you're in this zoo world, you should know the name Steve Martin. And if you don't, you should be wondering why you're not spending enough time looking into training, because if you were doing so, then you would know who Steve Martin is, at least in the United States. And I say that not to make you feel guilty, of course, but just because this is a name that you should know, and NEI is a name that you should know. And hey, if you didn't know it, now you know it. So cool, we're good. But yeah, this is really special. Every year, for the last couple of years now, NEI has done a bird show at Roger Williams Park Zoo. And I love spending time in Providence, Rhode Island, and I love going to Roger Williams Park Zoo. And so for the second year in a row, I am bringing you an interview with some of the team there. Now, last year, I talked to Amy Fennell, who was running the show there last year, and you're going to hear her name come up a couple of times. Amy is a great friend of mine and a great friend of the podcast, and yeah, we mention her. You'll see why I said that hesitantly. She comes up a couple times. But this year, Sean kind of took over the Amy role, and then Morgan took over Sean's role from last year. And so this episode is all about that transition and what that has been like for them and what the new birds and the new people are experiencing doing this. So if you haven't heard the episode from last year with Amy Fennell, I'd recommend going back and listening to it at some point. But if it's not going to stop you from enjoying this one. They're two very different episodes. Last year, we really went into the nitty gritty of how a bird show works and kind of took the audience behind the scenes to listen and experience that for themselves. And this year we talk about different things, leadership and transition and growth and honestly, a little bit of controlled chaos, which is really what training is all about sometimes. So before we get to all that, a quick reminder to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my interview episodes on Tuesdays or my Zoo News episodes on Friday. And hey, don't forget to follow along on the socials at Rossifari or on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And if you feel like supporting the podcast, you can do so for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. So now, with all of that said, I'm going to take you to my interview with Sean Hoelle and Morgan Lopes of Natural Encounters, Inc. at Roger Williams Park Zoo, and assisted by many of the birds that were in the building while we were talking. Enjoy!
Hi, my name is Sean Hoelle. I'm a senior trainer as part of Natural Encounters. We're here at the Roger Williams Park Zoo for a summer show. Woo!
We sure are. I am Morgan Lopes, and I'm also here in Rhode Island at Roger Williams Park Zoo as a trainer, too.
Very cool. Yeah. So this is our second year in a row being here at the zoo and doing an interview with the team here. And I'm very excited. And I'm excited to focus on the fact that this is year 2 and now like things have changed. So last year, for those listening, to remind y'all, you heard from Amy Fennell, who was running everything back then. And Amy is not here this year. Unfortunately, she passed away. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know she will listen to this and kill me for that.
I was like, no, he won't go there, but he did.
You did. No, Amy is off doing other work and has she came and helped set everything up, but then left you crazy people in charge. And I'm so excited to hear what that has been like for the both of you and just how that feels going, into that from her being here last year and everything. So let's start off by talking about that.
Yeah, so Morgan and I were both here last year, but in a very different position. I was kind of here helping assist Amy in running the day-to-day operations, and now this year, Amy helped me get squared away on how to run the day-to-day operations. So she was here for about 5 or 6 weeks to help us get started. And she came back out, visited. We've had some other people come out to visit because it's a lot of great chance to have people check in with us to see what's going on, because Morgan and I are still kind of learning what it's like to do this every day.
Of course. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Very cool. And what has your shift been?
Very, very big. I came in as seasonal on this roadshow last year. So that was my first experience with Natural Encounters. So I started there and then came back this year to kind of fill the role that Sean was filling last year. It's kind of help the day operate when he is able to have some time off and relax from his big responsibilities.
Like today, except I dragged him in for a podcast.
I wanted to.
Appreciate it. No, that's very cool. So you mentioned that you were a seasonal and then the season ended. So did you not stay with NEI during that time? Are you back again now?
I did do that. So I was a seasonal, and then by the time the season was up, I was a full-time employee. So luckily, I was very grateful to have been brought on about halfway through the season. So
cool.
Last July. Yeah, it was very exciting. I just had my 1-year anniversary with the company. I stayed with them, went back to Florida with them for the winter, and now came back for the roadshow.
Nice. Very cool. How did that, what was that meaningful to you? Did that feel good to go from seasonal to come join us?
It was amazing. I've been working on being in this field for about 7-8 years now, and I had been in a place where I was out of the field for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years actually, and it was incredible to be able to have this opportunity to come back into it and to love it so much, and to stay. The fact that they wanted me to stay with them was even better. It was great.
That's really cool. I feel like NEI does things differently than a lot of zoos and stuff. There seems to be, and this is just my vibe, you can tell me I'm completely wrong, but it seems like they value, they really take the time to figure out the individuals and sometimes pick from maybe outside of what you would expect to see being hired in at a normal zoo or aquarium or whatever, where oftentimes all of the trainers are interchangeable and look the same and have the same story and stuff like that. And so the fact that you started as a seasonal and then they saw something in you, I think that probably would mean more than even one that happens at a normal zoo aquarium type situation.
Right. You hit the nail on the head at that one. They definitely pay attention to each of their employees individually. They're not on a timeline. They're on a learning timeline versus an actual dedicated months or years timeline. So as you learn, they'll put you in as many opportunities to learn as you're open to, which is incredible. And it gives every different person kind of a different pathway to get to all these places that all the cool stuff the company does.
It's very cool. I like that. Basically, what I'm saying is they hire a bunch of weirdos.
You're not wrong.
I know. I've met you all. I've met so many of you now. That is, as a fellow weirdo, I can appreciate it. No, but that's very cool. And I think that, I don't know if that's intentional or not, or if it just comes from isn't that what training is? Looking at the individual and figuring that out and finding the unique characteristics and how to best work with them and bring out the traits that you want.
Behavior. It's what we do.
No, it exactly is. We can always talk about, training and when you go to school and when you learn about it in science and stuff, there's always that whole, well, this is how it operates. But really, when you get down to even what we're doing here at the Roadshow, it's we've got some of the same individuals as last year. We got some new individuals, bird and people wise. And we have to make sure that everyone's getting the right reinforcers, the right behaviors that work best for them, and the right antecedents. So that way everyone can succeed.
Yeah, it's really neat to see that put into a human perspective. A lot of places are, of course, on board with the training and positive reinforcement, of course, but to see that duplicated for their employees is something that I hadn't seen before. So it was really cool to come into that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I dig that. And I'm curious. So I've been going through a thing recently, and I always love to inject myself in here a little bit. I'm a narcissist. But I've been learning in the last couple of years just so much about training and so much theoretical stuff about training, learning the theory, reading the books, talking to Steve and Amy and y'all and so many other amazing trainers, volunteering at Aquarium of Niagara, where I'm not training with the seals and sea lions, but occasionally get to do behaviors with them and like do moments where I get to do the thing. And my theoretical knowledge is large. I have learned much. We were talking today, we were watching the show, and I asked you a question that a year ago would not have occurred to me,
Yeah.
And then when it's time to actually do it, holy cow, does everything just go out the window, it feels like. And I'm curious for both of you what that transition was like and how easy or hard that was for y'all. Because I'm amazed at the mistakes I will make, even just with a puppy. I'm not even talking about exotics. And then instantly be like, oh, I screwed up this. I know everything I just did wrong. And so I'm curious if you guys have any insight into that or what that transition was like, because now you're old pros.
I think I have a bit of an interesting perspective on this because I'm kind of going from the opposite direction.
Okay.
Where I got into this field very much without really much of a training background. And I got thrown into my first job doing free-flighted bird shows 6 years ago at this point, and had to learn what it meant to train and do all these things right away. So I got the practical doing it where you go through in your reinforcers and how to step up a bird, how to ask a bird to go fly to this perch. And now I'm spending a lot more time, especially kind of getting a little bit higher up in natural encounters, now looking at the theory and starting to go, okay, so that's what I was doing. What does that look like in the science? So I can start explaining it better and having a chance to help people work through it. So I'm kind of having the other thing where I'm like, I'm doing it. And then people go, what was that? And you're like, oh, wait, now I gotta.
That's the thing that obviously Steve told me to do. Yeah. I don't know.
It's very much now I'm really focusing on the science of what I was doing in those sessions.
Yeah, it's super interesting because you can also have the same conversation about the same training session that you had, but you have those trainers who were trained classically, I guess, or in a classroom. So they're talking about it with very specific terminology, and then you can have the same interpretation of the session but said in a completely different way by people using more of maybe layman's terms, so to speak, but they're talking about the same thing. It just sounds like a different language, which is really cool. I came from a mixed sort of background. I went to an incredible school and program, specifically the Exotic Animal Training and Management Program at Moore Park College.
We love Edom.
We know that.
We love Edom. Yeah, had a great time out there.
Yeah, it was amazing. So they really do a good job of balancing the classroom work with the textbook stuff, the theoretical things that you're talking about, and then being able to put that into practice with the animals that you're in front of all day long. But it is definitely my favorite thing that they said was like, it's an art and a science. And I've heard that across the board. It's like, you can learn the scientific aspect of it and learn the terminology and do all those things. But the second, like you said, you have an animal in front of you, you can name what's happening afterwards. But in the moment, you have to run through all those choices and all those decisions real time. So it's interesting to have that mix for sure. But it's definitely an art because you're always changing what reinforcers are balanced where and what's happening. So
I've always liked the art and the science thing. That makes a lot of sense to me. I've also recently come up with my own theory that it's relational and knowledge. And I know that we know that, but it's like almost a spectrum or a graph to me where like I watch the trainers that I see every day now, or, every time I'm there at the aquarium. And like one of them has an amazing relationship. And I'm not even talking about, they all have amazing relationships with the animals, but I'm talking about when doing the training, that it is almost completely relational. There are trainers that will give a reinforcer, even if the behavior doesn't happen because they just love the animals so much. And then there are the other, there are also trainers who will, if the animal does not do exactly what was requested, look like shocked, like, hey, robot, I input this word, this cue, and you did not output the behavior I was asking for. And so I've started to think of it as kind of like, some are very relational, some are very sciencey, and some are like, walking that line like we all strive to do when we do this stuff. Sure. But that's been the latest thing that, like, as I watch trainer, I start to process that in that way. And I think it's an interesting way to realize how differently people can approach the same thing and try and get the same,
I like that it comes across that way to you watching sessions and things like that. It is interesting because every single one of them is an individual and they have their individual relationship with me or with Sean can be completely different. Whether or not they do the same behavior is irrelevant almost, because they're going to do it to a different degree maybe, or to do it more enthusiastically or less so, based on the individual. And it changes all the time too. That's one of my favorite parts, is like being able to know the individual animal and what they're most comfortable with, and that kind of communication between you and that one specific animal. You can kind of see the way they're thinking almost in their eyes. That's the coolest part for me. But
that is really cool. Yeah. So, I'm curious, another thing, as we talk about the change from last year to this year, is obviously the relationship with Roger Williams Park Zoo. Now, this is an incredible facility. We love it here. And I know that last year, Amy talked about the fact that there was some good integration, and y'all are wearing your Roger Williams Park Zoo shirts. And I'm sure that people constantly come up to you not knowing that you're NEI and are like, where's the tree kangaroo? Or more accurately, where's the bathroom? But how much does that relationship matter? And how much do y'all get to know? I mean, you were late getting back here because you were talking to some of the keepers at the zoo here. I saw you. So like, how much has that advanced from year one to year two?
Oh, it's really a very similar relationship, I would say, but also, it's 1 year later. It's almost like a second year of friendship, really, where this year we're getting a chance, not only to work with the same keepers again for the most part, getting to meet some new keepers. And even I was chatting with some horticulture staff that have been helping us find some browse on property.
Nice. That's cool.
So like we're starting to, now year two, we're getting all the other departments that saw us last year, had a really good time with us. We had a great chance, great opportunities to interact with, but now we're back again. So they're like seeing familiar faces, seeing lots of fun people. But this year, what was really great is that something we didn't have the opportunity or the time for last year is that the zoo, keepers are actually getting a chance to be part of us for a day.
Oh, yeah?
We're doing some shadowing.
Really?
So we've worked it out this year so the keepers get a chance to see what it's like to see what we've been doing all day.
Wow. Loud. It's loud. That's my
very loud. Yeah. Yes. Some of these keepers do work with parrots and macaws, so they're used to the noise, but they haven't really gotten a chance to. They all come see our shows when they get the chance, but they've never really gotten to see the backstage, which you got to experience last year.
I've gotten to experience it so many times now. Barely, I know. I am so the access this podcast has gotten me is just. I'm the luckiest human. It's amazing. And watching what y'all do is really incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to rehash it completely because we did talk about it with Amy last year, but it is a new team and there's always going to be a new dynamic. So run through what it's been like and how that's going and how the communication is going and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think we've got, so Morgan and I were here last year. Hunter, who's on the team, was here for a little bit. And then everybody else, Julia's back. She's on vacation this week, which is where she fell out of my head for a moment there. But she was a seasonal last year who came back to help us. We have about 4 new people that are either been part of the company back in Florida or we hired them here.
Oh, okay.
And for some of them, this is their first animal job.
Wow.
Yeah. So
let me pause you there for a second. I'm honestly curious. Do they understand like that NEI is pretty special and cool and that Steve Martin is like a name? And I'm asking this because I am amazed, all due respect to y'all and to Steve and everyone, y'all are considered the best, like hands down considered the best.
Wow.
And that's to the people that know.
Mm-hmm.
But the sheer number of people that I talk to in this industry who really don't pay attention to training, who don't know that these extra things are out there and have never heard of the company is shocking to me. Because as an outsider, I was like, oh my God, I get to interview Steve Martin. This is so cool. And so I'm curious if people coming in kind of get what that is.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what for the seasonals this year. That was the interview question. Like, have you heard of natural encounters before?
It's a good question.
And for Anthony, one of our seasonals, great guy, love him, who has never been in the animal field before, though, he just happened to see a posting.
Wow.
Was like, this sounds interesting. So I'm hoping he's getting a great chance he's learning a lot. He's doing great, but I'm hoping he's getting a great opportunity to see a different perspective on how animals are taken care of in this industry. Because it's very much, a lot of people in this industry do know us and they know what it's like to be inside of a zoo, but from the outside, coming in completely blind, it's a very different look, that you get to see. You get to go from being just a visitor at the zoo to being on the backside where you get to actually see what it goes into the highest quality care that we can give these animals.
What I love the most too is seeing that whether or not they've heard of this natural encounters and this Steve Martin guy who's incredible, it kind of speaks for itself. When they come in, we're not sitting here going, hey, we're natural encounters. We have this, and that standards. Aside from animal care, of course, we present those. But outside of that, it's kind of like we just go about how we do things here and how we train and how we put on our presentations. But it's really cool to me to see how they start interacting and how once they kind of switches in their brain of like, this is different and this is big. I think that's happened with everyone here, but even especially the seasonals who, like you were saying, didn't really have animal experience or hadn't been a part of training like this. There comes a point in the summer, which I think we just kind of passed this point where they hit the switch. They start asking really good training questions. They start kind of understanding what's coming next versus us having to explain it or talk about it differently. And they start to realize that they're doing really cool stuff here. And it's incredible the kind of knowledge that goes behind it, even though from an outside perspective, it might just look like that was a really cool bird show. But yeah, everything we can present behind the scenes and watch them learn and do all the things that we were doing when we got here it's so cool to see them do.
That is really cool. And it's actually, it just speaks more highly to the company if people who are coming in without being impressed are still like, oh, this is special. Because, not even just in this industry, but in general, like companies can coast on a reputation, and that's very cool that's clearly not happening. And y'all have actual evidence of that fact, which is very cool. Awesome. So let's talk about some of the new birds that are doing the show this year, because we've had some changes. And so tell me about the burbs.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Did you see the Colombian government is spending almost $4 million to relocate Pablo Escobar's hippos?
In Brazil, a school of piranha attacked and injured at least 8 people at a beach resort.
First fatal mountain lion attack in 20 years in California.
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You may have seen me on Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive or Shark Week. So join me and my friends as we break down animal news from around the world and discuss all things wildlife. Click here to unlock these animal mysteries.
We have a few new ones this year. We've got lots of returning guests. Some of our macaw flock has moved around a little bit. We have mostly the same. We have a new blue-throated macaw who is paired with our one from last year. A new military macaw was brought into the mix as well. I know on last year's show, there was talk of how they explored the city a little bit.
I was here that day.
Yes, you got to see that firsthand.
It was so good.
So the leader of that fly-off was not necessarily, they're actually still working and doing a show. They're just in a different location right now. So we just have new ones here, and it gives them new experiences to fly around. Aside from the macaws, I gravitate to them because those are my flock.
Before we move on from the macaws, I know we talked about this last year, but it's a small enough detail that I want to throw it out again. But one of the rarest species of macaws period is here. And I remember when I was down in Florida the first time. And so talk about this. It's incredible.
Yeah, those two I mentioned, the blue-throated macaws are the ones that we like to highlight in the shows and talk about for sure. We have two of those, Hurricane and Shang. Hurricane is a returning bird. Shang was the new one, his buddy. So we definitely have them in the flock. We only have two here, but we also this year have another newcomer. Her name is Mindy, and she is a red-fronted macaw. They live in a similar, or in the area of Bolivia that the blue-throated macaws do. So it's another species we get to highlight that we're doing a lot of work to help try to save out in the wild, of course. So it's neat to have those in the flock, because when they fly in, it's all these different colors, and then we get to pinpoint who is who and all that stuff in the show.
Very cool. And for conservation purposes, how many blue-throateds roughly are
the estimate right now is about 400 individuals.
Yeah, not great.
Not at all.
Not great.
Very small number.
As a person who loves a lot of really endangered animals, even I'm like, eek. That's a small number.
That's too low.
Yeah.
And one of the other birds we brought this year, who has done shows in other places, that's also another great conservation message, is we have a hooded vulture who has come to our shows this year named Buster. She's doing great. We really like having her part of the show because last year we have, and she's back again this year, Mulder, our black vulture. So we get a great chance in our shows to not only get to highlight a really cool, one of the coolest birds, I think, vultures. I'm really partial to macaws, but next up online are vultures. Really cool species that a lot of people don't always see in the best light, but they do such an amazing job for us helping to clean up our environment. So we had a black vulture last year, and they're local. They're found here in Rhode Island, so all the people get a chance to see what it looks like and have some cool interactions with a black vulture. But then we get to highlight a hooded vulture, a critically endangered species, in our shows from Africa. So we get a chance to actually really highlight their struggles out there in the wild. Because one of the biggest things with our shows is they're there to have fun, but they're also there to be able to promote and inspire people to want to protect these species.
Absolutely. And I'm curious. So, especially either of you can talk to this, but I know you've been on stage and done the theater thing. So you've probably learned how to read an audience by now, which is something that I actually find a lot of people, even in my industry, actually have no clue how to do. I'm amazed that I'll get off stage and people won't know what just happened to the audience, but that's aside. Anyway, I digress. But I'm curious, as you sit there and you read the audience, what is the reaction like when you start talking about vultures? Do you get views, and do you see any palpable changes as you're watching and they're getting to see this?
Yeah, we do get that. So we do set up to see if people know what vultures are first. We always ask them if they know of a bird that has a bald head that eats dead things, and usually you get somebody yelling vulture and you get to see some faces. But then we talk about how important they are, and not only are they cleaning up the environment, eating the dead things, but they're doing a great service of their stomachs are so strong they can kill off many bacterial species that might be on that meat. They can kill the rabies virus, and usually when I say that, all of the faces go, whoa. And
yeah, that's the point. Yep.
Yeah. I was like, I usually go, yeah, right? So we want these birds because that's, you say something, and part of it is making that connection. So you can go into the in-depth about how deep acidic their stomachs are. Deep. That's my word for acidic, deep. Cooking channel, the depth of flavor. But how acidic their stomachs are that take care of all these really, really long scientific named bacterias. Or you just say, when they eat the rabies virus, they kill it. And so many people all of a sudden go, wow, I did not know that. And you're like, yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. It must feel really good to see that change,
It is.
Now, speaking of the audience, I do have to ask. So y'all are supposed to be good at training, I thought, right? Supposed to be. And the first thing that you look at in training is antecedents. And y'all set up a bird show directly in front of where everybody sits and eats their food. The cafe is right there, and it's mostly people eating food directly in front of your birds. So are you actually bad at training and don't understand antecedents, or what happened?
A little bit of both, probably, or we just like to challenge ourselves. I don't know. Honestly, this Sean hasn't even heard this. This just happened at our 11 o'clock show today, but things happen, and we are in a food court, and that's how it goes. So we have at the end of the shows the opportunity to donate to all these conservation funds that we work with, and we have a really pretty gorgeous donation box that folks can come up and hand some dollar bills to one of our birds. So this morning had a white claw, our pied crow, out there, and it can be a really exciting moment for these, especially the young ones, to come up and meet these birds at the end of the show and pass their dollars off. But it can also be a little intimidating, especially if you're just as tall as the box is or you're just under it. So we had a lovely little girl come up with her donation in one hand and an open bag of goldfish in the other hand. And everything was fine. Everything's okay. We're doing a good job. But White Claw is fantastic. She's so good at her job. But the kid got a little bit nervous. The little girl went to hand the dollar. White Claw grabbed it. And then she was like, oh my goodness, a bird is right in front of my face. So she kind of held on to her dollar. And when she jumped back with the dollar, the bag of goldfish went up in the air and opened all over the ground. Oh, no. Right in front of the foraging crow. Oh, no. But I say that to say this. She was incredible. This speaks to the training that she has had throughout her entire life. She stayed with me on stage. Wow. She focused on the dollar bills that were in front of her. She didn't even go to the ground. She looked at there. She had all the goldfish in front of her. She made excellent choices and looked at her options and came back to sit on this perch that's on the donation box. And then I quickly asked her to come join me further back from the stage while our other staff dove in and cleaned up the goldfish that were on the ground. And then once that was done, she went right back to the box and continued her donations and did incredible the rest of the show. So it is definitely a challenge, and it's something that we work with daily. But the amazing way that these birds have been set up to learn what their choices are and how to make them is incredible. And it saved us today, because she could have had a lot of goldfish.
Oh yeah. That's
but
incredible.
She had the food she's supposed to have instead.
Yay, that's awesome. I also have this mental image when you say that staff jumped in to clean up, that it was a bunch of, hungry trainers who they were also forage feeding.
Not far off.
No, but that is really cool. I love that. I would imagine that would present a lot of unique, and I love that you guys embrace the challenges so much, because you will literally call birds to perches in the seating area. It's not even that you're just in front of it, which is tough enough, I would think, but you are flying birds over tables with food and distractions galore, and trusting their training and your relationships, which I think is fascinating.
Trust is the word.
A lot of trust, yeah. And also that, I'm going to borrow a quote from Chris Jenkins, who you've met before, which is, we let the consequences drive the behavior. So we've been spending so much time with our crows and ravens that do the dollar bill collection, giving them lots of good treats for helping out with those dollars, that they're like, yeah, I could go fly over all these people out to the tables where there might be an errant French fry. Or if I sit here, I know I'll get just as good of snacks. I'll get just as good of reinforcers. I'll weigh my options, and usually they'll pick the behavior that's a little bit easier for them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I kind of like that training is largely predicated on the fact that animals are lazy and hungry, because we are too. Like, we are animals, so we are too. And I enjoy that. Yeah, no, I really do think it's amazing sometimes when I'm in some of these discussions about higher level behavior stuff, and it always breaks down to, well, what would be the easiest thing to do for snackies?
Essentially.
Yeah.
You set that up ahead of time. There can be everything like you just described out on tables in front of you. And if they have learned where the best things are, they'll stay there. It's pretty useful.
It's very cool. Are there any other birds that you wanted to highlight that are new here?
We have a very young one. We had a crane last year in our show. Her name was Swope. And this year we had 2 hatchlings at our home facility. And one of them, his name is Flounder. He's here with us this summer. He's just born in September, so he's not even a year old yet. And watching him learn the new space and learn what it is to even fly is a pretty interesting thing to watch. They did an excellent job setting him up back in Florida to come here. But this is all brand new, of course, at 10 months old. So it's been an interesting way to see a bird learn.
Yes, it's been he was a great experience for a lot of us who are new to a roadshow, new to training a new bird, how to do what seems like a behavior that wouldn't be that hard. Like flying to that platform took a few days of a lot of different antecedent arrangements for him to be successful because he didn't really have that skill yet. So we had to teach him that skill. And now he's got it, and he's part of our show and gets to do a great job.
Every day, yeah. It's great.
It's very cool. Very cool. And then one thing I always like to ask about is any challenging, and it might even just be what we're just talking about, but any challenging behaviors that had to be worked through maybe once making the transition from Florida to Rhode Island?
Ooh, let me think real quick. So the last new bird we have that Morgan's pointing at the cage right behind you
and smirking.
So another really cool bird we have this year is Jester. She's a black-throated magpie jay. They're found in Mexico. Really cool birds. They look very similar to a blue jay, but their tail is about 3 times the length of their body.
Absolutely gorgeous bird. I remember when I was here a couple weeks ago and you showed me Jester, I lost it. I was like, what is happening right now? Yeah.
She is one of my favorites. She's part of your favorite shows that we have here, the farmyard shows,
yes.
Which is a little kind of smaller stage where we work with a lot of our smaller birds that might not do well in big open spaces, just for an audience's perspective, their size, and other complications we might see. So this was her first time really getting to fly in a show like this. So not only did we have to work through training her on all this, but we also had to do a lot of work with the human side of it, because Jester is a very tiny bird who weighs about 200 grams. And it doesn't take much to fill her up in one setting.
Half a mealworm is good.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially when she was newer to it, trying to get everything down. So she was, I think for a lot of our trainers, one of the harder challenges, because they had to learn what signs to see when this bird is motivated and interested and wants to do the behaviors, but also see when that motivation starts to fall off and start wrapping up her time out, hanging out with the people so she can go home and not sit on top of a roof for a few minutes.
Yeah, that was definitely a learning curve for me as well. I've never worked with a bird that small and with that kind of ability to only eat, 2 mealworms at once and then be like, okay, I'm good. I have my fill and I'm ready to do something else. That was definitely a learning curve for me, for sure. Another one also that was kind of a challenge, not necessarily for our own antecedents, but for the fact that we're free flying these birds in nature, was Ramon, another bird at that farmyard space. It's springtime here when we start, and there's lots of local birds that are also fledging and wanting to grow up in their own space, and very, very protective mother birds. We are in this kind of space near a bamboo forest. Ramon, is a Livingston's Turraco, so a bit of a smaller bird. And he is normally flying around the farmyard space. He has a vine that he can walk through and everything else. The local birds decided to pick him as what they saw as a threat. So we had some grackle activity in that area, and they made it a point to show us that they weren't really excited that he was there all the time. And that was something that we also had to try to work through, not only to make Ramon comfortable first and foremost with these local birds that were around, but also to know what we could do in that space while the local birds were there. Those grackles fledged eventually after about a month, 3 weeks to a month, maybe a little bit less. But during that time, it was really important that the trainers who were having him out there with him paid attention to the signs that the other grackles were showing, not just the behavior we're seeing from our bird. So that was an interesting learning curve as well.
Interesting. And actually that transitions beautifully to the next question that I had, which was that when I was here the last time, there were some, I don't know, attacks is probably too strong of a word, but there were some native birds that were not very excited about what was going on the main stage. And so I'm curious if you can talk about that a little bit and like how that gets handled.
Yeah. So I think you're referencing the robins.
Yes.
Yeah. So lot of songbirds, smaller birds that would be seen as like prey by many larger animals, they do a behavior called mobbing, which basically, if they see an owl, a hawk, an eagle, anything that they deem as something they don't want around or a threat, they will get loud and get every other bird involved and start flying at it. which is always an interesting sight. And we get those really great questions. Why is this little bird flying at a large owl? But for a lot of the times, it's just they are trying to say, we don't want you around. Get away. It's our baby's time to learn to fly. And I'd prefer it if a big predator wasn't sitting in a tree nearby. So for a lot of times, it actually gives us a great chance to talk about natural behavior, because that's what our shows are. They're natural behaviors. So we get a chance to tell the audience, hey, you've probably seen a crow or a hawk in your backyard getting little blue jays flying at them. So it's just a great chance for us to talk about it. And generally, unless Ramon, I think, was where we kind of had to make some larger decisions where he took a few days out of show, mostly not just for the show's sake, but for his, because he would end up in a bamboo forest where he was trapped, or stuck really behind these grackles. And he was trying to get back to his trainers. And they were very much saying, our babies are here, you have to leave. So if the birds aren't bothered by it, we just keep going. We give a chance to talk to the audience, we get a chance to show them that cool natural behavior from the local birds, and we, generally just move on.
Speaking of natural behaviors, we love in the show to show the audience what the birds are naturally doing out in the wild. So whether they're catching food in the air, like bugs for our trumpeter hornbill, they can show that off. But there was a time this summer we had a whole bunch of sun. Of course, it's summertime, and it was very, very hot on our stage. And there's natural behaviors that our red-legged Seriama pumpernickel likes to do, which is take a sun bath. And that is not something that we work into our show normally, but he was really comfortable up there. And he decided for quite a few shows for a couple weeks to lay out on the stage. And that was his sun bath. So he, rather than for him, we showcase their slams with a lizard, like how they would hunt. They'll pick up a lizard, slam it on a rock. And also hops. They can jump really high, so we'll show off how high he can hop and how fast he can run when he leaves. So that's the normal setup. But then he gets on stage and realizes how warm and comfortable it is, and then is just a pancake. So he is face first on the stage, wings out. I'm showing a picture of it now.
That's so cute.
And there was many times where Sean and I just had to say, well, if you can't beat him, join him. And then we sat on the stage as well. That is one of the most reinforcing things that he could have had. He gets that, of course, back here in his aviary, and he can also have sand baths back here in the aviary. But for him to be comfortable enough on stage in front of a huge audience to put himself in such a prone position was really cool to be able to share with the audience. It took us 10 minutes to move on with the show, but it's that kind of natural behavior that just comes out of nowhere that's really neat to be able to share with them.
That is really cool. And now I get the whole natural encounters thing.
There you go. It all comes full circle.
So, you, sir, are wearing not the Roger Williams Park Zoo blue today because you came in on a day off to do this. So you are wearing an orange shirt. And you are wearing a bow in your hair.
I do have a bow in my hair. That's not where I thought that was going. I do have a bow in my hair today.
And I don't know where you thought it was going, but okay. But I'm going into full on. We are now critiquing your clothing. So
Perfect.
Let's talk about this.
Zookeeper chic.
But I'm curious if things like that, because I've heard stories from other trainers that, a bow can completely derail a relationship until it comes out, or glasses versus contacts. And I know, Sean, obviously you weren't doing the shows today because you're off, but like you're back here and you're you, but you're wearing orange. And that's not blue. So I'm curious if y'all have seen any behavior things that, with that, or if that changes things, or if not with this group.
I haven't noticed anything with the bow. I've tried it out a couple times now, and it seems to be okay. They don't really mind so much. I think our birds are so generalized to meeting so many different people and to having different, maybe colors or uniforms around because they've worked in so many different spaces. I think they're pretty comfortable with most people. I think the closest thing I've seen to that is sometimes if we were to have our nails done or something and it's some crazy color or a Band-Aid over something, that's something they think about a little bit more, some more than others. But otherwise, I haven't really seen many differences in clothing-wise.
Yeah, we, with Amy back at home, and I've, for the past few years, been spending a lot of time with some of our younger birds like Flounder or some of the younger birds at other shows. We do what we call training in controlled chaos. So we like to, as the young as the birds can be, introduce them to the most things that we can possibly introduce them to in their training.
Nice.
And part of that is because they're not going to be in a sterile environment. They're gonna see us in a different colored shirt. The orange shirt, most of them have seen me in because I've trained them in this shirt.
Fair, yeah.
So they really haven't cared that much about it. But you know what? We did when we got home. We had a baby kite last year who sometimes me wearing a very loud colored shirt meant I'm not coming over today for food without somebody else around.
Right.
Because I was newer to work in that bird. And they had spent a lot of time with some other trainers. So I was still just getting into the rhythm of working with them. And I wore this orange shirt. They wouldn't come over to me for that day. But we spent a lot of time putting that training in that, like Morgan was saying, where a lot of these birds they're so generalized to so many different things.
That makes sense. In general, do you think that zoos and aquariums should be able to give their teams more time to train specifically their animals than they get to?
Oh, yeah.
In a perfect world, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, we all understand the many reasons. Husbandry also has to happen. Money is not unlimited. We get it. But is that something that y'all would like to see?
I do think so, because while it may take an additional amount of time in the beginning, and it is a big thing to undergo, it's a big task to take on. But if the time is available to put in for a solid amount in the beginning, it will save you time on your husbandry. It will save you time on veterinary procedures. It will be so helpful in so many other ways down the line if we put in the time right away and we do that first, especially in controlled chaos, because then new things aren't as scary. But I definitely wish that all facilities could have the time to train that we do. It would be amazing.
That is really cool. Now, I am curious on the flip of that, when y'all are at a facility like here or, even back in Florida, how much, how up on husbandry are y'all? And on the other side of it, is that something that you spend a lot of time learning and studying, or are there separate people that do that? Or, I'm just curious, because I talk to so many people who do husbandry as their primary thing and then catch up on training when they can. So I'm curious if there's a flip to that, or if you have to truly be a jack of both trades.
Yeah, for us, it's being able to do everything. So we've got 8 hours that we're here a day, and we've got 4 shows to put on. And our team that's here is doing every aspect of that. They're in the shows. They're back here helping make enrichment if they have the time. And we're taking care of the birds every day. So we're scrubbing floors, switching out waters, cleaning bowls. So when we go back to Florida, it's the same thing. It's the same people that are presenting these shows are also the ones taking care of these birds.
I will say that with a caveat, we do work with birds. And if you've had bird poop on your car, it's a lot easier to clean than a 20-pound pile of elephant dung or something like that. So there are definitely certain caveats and good things about working with birds that makes our husbandry a little bit different than some other species would be. But it's still hard work, but he's right. Chris Jenkins gets in here and scrubs enclosures, like everyone in the whole company does. And it's really a balance of making sure that that's done as efficiently as possible so that we have time for the enrichment and whatever training has to be done that day. So
makes sense. Very cool. Would Amy ever do that before she passed? I'm the worst.
R.I.P. Amy. Wish you were here.
We do wish you were here.
We do miss
that would
Amy.
be fun. Yes, we love Amy. Oh my goodness, I'm a bad person. So, you had mentioned Turocco here earlier, and did you say Livingston's Turocco?
Livingston's Turocco.
Does that have a different name as well, or is it just a Livingston's Turocco? Or I don't know the name Livingston's Turocco, and I mean, y'all are the bird experts. I was just not sure. I love Turoccos in general, and but I'm not by no means an expert on them, and so I'm going to keep vamping while Sean looks this up.
We are the bird experts, but not the name experts.
Yeah, I do know. I mean, birds are new for me, so I'm still learning this as well. So I'm definitely into knowing that. But as far as I've seen, it's a Livingston's Turocco. But I do know that, I mean, there's so many different subspecies of Turocco that there's could be multiple names for them.
Well, I'm super happy to learn either way. But while Sean is looking this up, will you tell me about the individual?
Sure. Yeah. He is one of our fastest moving birds. That's kind of a dynamic I had to learn really quickly last year coming in. Like I said, I'm new. This is my first bird experience as a whole group anyway. He's very quickly moving from one place to another. So in a training session with him, or when you have him out at that farmyard space, we have to be as fast as he is, or faster even, to kind of prepare and know where he's going to head to. But as an individual, he's pretty fun. He was actually trained at one point to be on people's heads as part of a performance. So it's a really interesting feature that he has, an interesting behavior that he knows that sometimes he will execute to us when who knows? We don't really know, but it's something that he hasn't been reinforced for in a long time. So it's not something we see very often, but he is one that has a behavioral history that you have to know of before you go in and are just like, yeah, we're just going to, do a training session with him, things like that. But he has we like to call it his war cry as well. These Turacos have a really distinct a cry, essentially, like a call. It's very low and long. When he wants to make a yell, he certainly can.
Nice. And what is his name?
Ramon. Yes, he has a very cool punk rock mohawk. These Livingston Stracos have, and him and his brother, it's Ramon and Clash. Yes, right, from the Ramones and the Clash.
Nice, very cool. And Livingston Straco?
They are only known as Livingstone Stracos.
Interesting. Okay, I need to go out and see this guy again when we're done here, because I'm intrigued by that. I love Turacos. They were one of the first birds I ever fell in love with. Just one day, I was at the Cincinnati Zoo, and they had sectioned off one of the walkways, and everyone else, they literally were blocking people from going through, and my nosy butt was like, what's going on back here? And I came up and was like, hey, what are y'all doing? Can I see what you guys are doing if I stay back here? And they were like, oh yeah, we have Zulu, a lady Ross's Turaco, that we are doing some training stuff with. And I was like, cool, mind if I watch? And no, of course not. So I was watching, and then they were like, oh, hey, come here. And they brought me in and did the running across arms thing. And I had been eating a pretzel, and I think I had some pretzel crumb. And so Zulu ran arm, stopped, turned, looked at me, and came over to me. And this was before I was doing Rossifari. This was before I knew any of this stuff. And this bird came over to me and I'm assuming it was the pretzel, and was pecking at my shirt. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. I love you. Now, what kind of bird are you again? And so ever since then, and one of the beautiful things was early on with the podcast, I got to interview some of the team that had been doing that. And it turned out that one of them had been there, and we did not know that, but I found a photo and I got to meet again the bird that I had met before I started all of this. So yeah, now I love Turacos mainly because of that moment.
And those are the moments we're trying to make here at the zoo.
Yep. Yeah, it was amusing. We had been talking about how people will duck away when you have a bird fly towards them. And as the macaws flew off, you were gone, but they flew very low over a bunch of heads, as they are wont to do. And everyone in front of me shot down, and I was just standing there like, this is so cool.
But yeah, they're not expecting it. They do. It's one of the best jokes in the shows. If you duck, they'll just fly lower. So.
Because they will.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, but I did want to give you each an opportunity to share about a conservation organization that you like.
Sure. I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm very partial to our macaws. I have been for a very long time. And that is one that we highlight, the World Parrot Trust. We talked earlier about the blue-throated macaws. There is a project down in Bolivia between us here in the States and them that's hopefully working to repopulate their space out there and to protect their space. And the World Parrot Trust does not only that, but incredible work all across the world with parrots of all different kinds of species. So definitely they're a highlight for us.
Yeah, and for me, it'd be Volpro. They work with vulture species in Africa and Asia to help repopulate, work on conservation efforts for them, because for some of those species out there, they've lost 97% of the population. And it's a crisis. Without vultures, the world gets stinky and the world gets smelly, and it's full of bacteria.
All right, very good. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tail left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Okay, I've still been debating this all day. So
Okay. I'm trying to remember what the worst one I ever had. So I used to work at the Long Island Aquarium, and we would present alligators for people to get a chance to go close with and interact with, and we were holding them. And there was once where I was holding that alligator, and thankfully I had a green shirt on because it tail slapped, got a little rambunctious, and next thing I knew, all down my shirt, all down my shorts.
Oh, no.
And that's why I always have an extra shirt and pair of shorts now in my car when I come to work, because
Fair.
I had very large reptile poop go completely down me.
Oh, goodness. That I can't imagine that smelled nice.
Oh, it did not. That I think I just threw out that shirt. I don't even think I let it in my
It's not
car.
worth it. Yeah.
It wasn't worth it to try to clean that anymore.
But you learn things, and now you're prepared for any situation.
Yes, now I always have extra clothes.
Right, that's very smart. Okay, I think the one I'm deciding on happened more recently, actually, when I was in Florida doing our Winged Encounters show. That is all macaws all the time. And part of the presentation is that the macaws will come out to this big, large open area, and other folks that are visiting the park can hold what we call T-perches. And then the cool part is that they're holding the perch. It's very tall, maybe like 6 feet tall. And then the birds come and land on the perch above them. That's a very prone position to be in. If you're below a bird and you are a young child staring right up into their bodies. So the cool part is when you watch behavior, you can kind of notice feather positioning and posture in the birds. So I'm sitting there, I'm trying to hold the perch, but then I'm watching the young girl and have a great time. And then I just see it happening. You're like, oh no, this is not good. And this poor girl is just mouth open, smiling, staring straight up into it. And at the right moment, I don't know how I timed it, but I just swept my hand in, caught it in my hand and put it behind my back and kept going.
Nice.
And then the family was like, oh my goodness. And then somebody came up behind me after the birds were doing their things. I put the stick down. They were like, have some baby wipes, please.
Yes.
So it was a savior. I saved somebody else from having a poop story.
Poop story.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. I've been thinking about this. I appreciate being able to have this opportunity. Last year when you were recording with Amy, I was 2 enclosures down in our macaw flight right there when I was like, what are they doing over there? This seems so interesting. I wonder if I can do that one day. And a year later, here we are.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
And we're here for Memorial for Amy. So
Yes, this is very sad. This is all for her.
The worst.
The dedication.
Just the worst.
Loving memory. No, thank you for having us here. We're excited to have you back. We always want people to come visit us and see what we do.
Yay. Training is such a fun topic, and I love how so many of the people who I talk to about it are total experts, but also just really chill about that fact. Like, I don't know, Sean and Morgan and Amy and Chris and Steve and just everyone I've talked to at NEI are very, very good at what they do. And very humbly so, which I just really love. So again, apologies to my good friend, Amy Fennell, for killing her off in this episode. She can be rewritten back into the series in a future episode. This is kind of like a comic book, so we can bring Amy back. Don't worry, y'all. Don't worry. But I had a lot of fun with this team, and I always do. And I'm always so grateful that I get to go and see them do the thing, both from the front of the stage and behind it, because honestly, watching that is incredible. Like I said, if you haven't heard the Amy Fennell episode from last year, go check it out. It is well worth your time. Plus, she was still alive back then, so I know, I'm terrible. But yeah, the day that this episode is dropping, there's actually a major hurricane that is hitting Florida and is hitting right where NEI is located. So a lot of my friends and the voices that you heard today and stuff are actually going through a hurricane right now. So I really hope that doesn't make my numbers go down in Florida. No, I'm kidding. What I really hope is that they're all super safe and that all of the burbs and all of the people are well taken care of. I know that they're, used to it and it is part of life in Florida, but it's never not going to worry me, especially when I'm just thinking about how wonderful and amazing these people are. So if you have a second to send some, thoughts and positive vibes to our friends in Florida, please do so. And, speaking of hurricanes, I tend to talk about this more on Zoo News, but I was just playing an area of North Carolina that was about 20 minutes away from where the devastation there is happening. And it was actually really interesting. Our crew showed up and they had a prepaid reserved rental car. And when they went to pick it up, the person at the Avis counter was like, "Are you with FEMA or the Red Cross?" And they were like, "No." And they were like, "Oh, then you can't have a car," which all of us were super cool with and we made it work. Would have been nice to get an email from Avis, not complaining about anything other than that part of it. But, it was such a stark reminder of the fact that right now there are parts of this country that are being devastated by crazy climate change influenced hurricanes, like right now. And while hurricanes have always been a thing, if you really look into the information about these, they are unique hurricanes and not in a good way. They are a product of climate change and a product of us not doing enough good for and doing too much bad to the environment. And, that is something that we try to fight here on Rossifari and combat. And I hope that if you're listening, you take that seriously too. And if you don't, might be a good time to look at that situation. But I know most of you do. So, all right, I've already rambled on too much here. I want to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And last but not least, I want to remind y'all that the word credits backwards is Steiderk.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.